Very, very few people in sobriety bring God into the bedroom. If we could, if we did, what an incredible connection we could make and what incredible healing could happen. You have to have a God of your understanding that loves sex and loves you as a sexual being. And I do.
My name is Fana Asfa, and after doing the backbreaking work to save and reclaim my own life, my passion now is to help others do the same. Since writing my debut book, Sober Daughter, the amount of people that wanted more inspired me to create this podcast. This space is for both real people and industry professionals to share inspiring experiences and usable tools for us all to connect and heal ourselves together. Welcome to Sober Daughters Podcast Season 2, the podcast where we talk all about the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with deep healing and recovery. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about sexual healing with Sydney Reece. Sydney Reece is an international educator in social justice advocacy and multicultural collaboration. She's also a meditation teacher specializing in addiction and trauma resilience, using mindfulness-based practices, Buddhist psychology, and a 12-step recovery principles of service to heal in and with community and contemplative inquiry. She has over 10 years of experience supporting adults, formerly incarcerated individuals, and the homeless youth, as well as the health professionals who serve them. I am so happy to have you here, Sydney. How you doing?
I am well. How about you? I'm just so excited to be with you. Look at you go, sober daughter. Look at you go.
I am so happy to have you here, and I have just admired you. I currently admire you and the work that you do and the wisdom that you share in such a powerful and generous way. And I just know people have so much to learn from you because I learn so much every time I'm around you. So I was like, I need her here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first off, I want to say what brought all this into my mind was I remember hearing you speak, and you were standing at the podium and you just shut the whole place down. And I remember, because I thought we might be talking about something else, and you just went straight in for the jugular. And you were like, we're going to talk about sex. And we're going to talk about what all that means and what's behind it, what's underneath it, and y'all are going to learn today. And the whole place was like, you could hear a pin drop. And I remember in my head that day, I said, oh my God, I need her to be here on Sober Daughter with me and tell us all what's really going on, because it was incredible, honestly.
Thanks for that. I think that's one of the promises, beautiful promises about staying sober for a long time and getting older. You know, the more and more we do this work, the more we have a daily looking and a spiritual practice of reflection, always couched in service. We get the ability to walk in a room and kind of feel what's needed. And that's the Wednesday night, incredible meeting, lots of young folks. I mean, my sobriety date is January 12th, 1985, but that was a night where I stood at that podium and I was like, okay, God, what's needed? And you guys were so alive, and everybody's checking everybody out in the meeting, and it's, you know, just all that kind of energy. And I was like, I wonder if they know that they can actually bring God into the bedroom and have an even greater experience.
God into the bedroom.
Yeah. You know, I think so many of us, I know it was true for me as well. Well, let me finish with this, that we kind of think our sex life is over, or that our sexuality is somehow going to be dimmed or greatly impeded without drugs and alcohol. And I know that there are folks who I sponsor who, some of them have never ever had a sexual experience without being under the influence. And when I was going through my divorce back in 2013 and was going through inventory to look at what was it that I was doing that helped bring the demise of that relationship, because it was my commitment to take a bullet for this guy and be married and, for the rest of our lives. And it didn't happen that way. And it always happens in the bedroom. The bedroom is always the place where the earthquake begins, right? It's eye contact, it's less touching, it's less, lingering with each other, and it's less hanging out in the bedroom. And working with Bob Olson, he said to me, Sid, very, very few people in sobriety bring God into the bedroom. And he says, if we did, he says, what an incredible connection we could make and what incredible healing could happen. And so I took that to heart.
It's such a wild concept outside of the spiritual space. For me, the years that I've had sobriety now, everything is through a spiritual lens. But the bedroom is one of those places where I'm like, what does that even look like? What does that even mean?
Right.
So I wanted to ask you some questions just about getting it started on kind of what blew my mind when you first started your talk was, what are your motives? And that kind of challenged me to think, are we looking clearly at how we're even approaching sex, how we're even engaging in sex, and what does that mean, like these motives, and how does that create either connection or disconnection for us?
Just to take a step back to give folks who are sober a context. So in the program that I work, there are 3 inventories. There's resentment inventory, fear, and sex. And so these 3 areas, resentment, right? Jealousy, anger, resentment, frustration, fear, driven by 100 forms of fear. Oh my goodness. And fear ought to be classed with stealing, right? We know to have fear is actually wrong, and we can talk about that another time, particularly when we're in a program of recovery. We don't need to keep living off of fear, but somehow we are. And then sex. So these are these 3 areas where intellect and the subconscious can actually be working against each other and absolutely just wild and wildly unruly with our desires, with our fears, with our ideas, with belief systems from the past. So we write this inventory. And the most important thing to ask ourselves that I don't know that we do is, what's motivating you, right? What is motivating you in your drinking? What is motivating you in holding on to an ideal that you know is false? You're unlovable. You're not worthy. You're dumb. You'll never amount to anything. I mean, whatever those hallmark resentments are, particularly if we come from families that, both my parents were alcoholics. They, shouldn't have had kids. We have so much factual evidence that they weren't at their highest self talking to us as adults. They weren't there, lacking in maturity, lacking in their own psychological health. So we know, but we're still holding on to that. So what's motivating you by still believing a lie, being dragged around by your ego and your fear? And what's motivating you in the bedroom? Are you trying to connect? Are you trying to feel love? Are you trying to feel a sense of power? Are you trying to control? Or are you showing up with an invitation to play, to create, to get to know at a deeper level who's there, get to know yourself at a deeper level? Or maybe even redefine what pleasure is, giving and receiving. But if you're coming in to prove something, and this is what I was really feeling in that room, right? Is, oh my God, that loneliness of alcoholism will continue, right? Because if I'm coming in with an agenda, if I'm coming in all the time with a persona, and don't get me wrong, if you dig a pig mask and a tutu, big up. If you like play, right? If you like play postures and all that, big up. But I'm not, that's not what I'm talking about. But isn't there just some time, I know there is for me, that I just wanted to be made love to, held, nibble, bit, do all of that. And it's just Sid. And have somebody be there with me and for me. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to have that presence. So it was important for me to really sit in that time. What do you want, Sid? What's motivating you here? And that question is really just between you and God. And the first thing you answer is probably not the answer. You
Right.
got to sit in meditation, 30, 45 minutes, go for a long walk. What is motivating me here? And whatever it is, that's the jackpot, right? And see in your answer if it's just you again. See in your answer if it's just instincts being met or drives being met. And you'll know that it's drives being met as soon as it's over. You can't recall it or you can't have a sense of it.
Oh my God.
And that's okay. But it's okay. I mean, sometimes it's like an itch you want to scratch, and that's cool. But if we're going to try to bring God and our full selves, all of myself, into the bedroom, and it's not just for my partner, or I'm not just, there's some, a deeper connection, a little bit of sacredness going on. What am I up to? What am I going for?
What am I up to? Yes, that's huge to me, especially because I don't, particularly in my background and how I was raised, sex was never, ever, ever, ever a conversation that was had, or intimacy, or relations, or any of that stuff. And to think that people can still be physically a certain age, but never have asked themselves,
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah.
What am I doing? What am I trying to get? And the selfishness or the disconnection. And I love that you said, am I showing up wanting to create and invite and play? I don't think I've ever asked that question. And that's such a beautiful question.
And it's hard if I'm still wired through the alcoholic mind. And the alcoholic mind says that I have to get something from the outside in order to feel different on the inside rather than coming from the inside out.
Yeah.
Like how do we bring in the traditions in our couple or in our home life? And it's hard. It's hard.
It's such a complete counterintuitive way to look. I mean, from the selfishness idea of, what am I going to get from this to what am I bringing and what are my intentions, which is, I think, honest to say from most people I know, especially women that I know, the last piece is the sexual piece. And it's the most uncomfortable and the most uncovering, discovering, and discarding. And it can be really scary. I know at least for me, from my experience, that is the last frontier. And that is a space that I've been in, navigating kind of what it is that I am bringing and what it is that I'm searching for and seeking, and am I seeking it outside of myself? And this whole idea of this intimacy, true intimacy, because I don't think we can understand intimacy until we're in recovery. At least in my alcoholism, I can't understand intimacy. And then the layers and depth of it.
I don't know if we can't understand intimacy in our alcoholism. I know that it is an intoxicant that functions as a third entity in a relationship, right? It's you, the person, and then whatever alcohol or drugs you're doing. I think we can love and have great affection and great bonds to people in our alcoholism, but I'm not sure for myself if I was ever able to capitalize on them or to have attunement and alignment, in my alcoholism. And, I don't know who's listening, but I really do want to say this just based on what you said about women. I know that men, it happens for them as well, but sex gets better. It gets so much better, so much juicier and hot and satisfying and fulfilling with time and age and, just this constant companionship that we seek with God. Because what happens, all barriers fall away, fear falls away. What happens, we really start to see that kind of connection to everything and everybody, and belonging becomes so much more real, visceral, and so connection can be really, really deep. We stick with it. I mean, the more inventory I've written, the more that I try to face and be rid of what is blocking me from the sunlight of the spirit, the better sex is.
Oh, I love it. And that's a good promise. That's a good promise.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's my story.
Especially that it gets juicier. So I have also a question for some sober people who have shared this with me too. Is there's this old saying that is the Madonna whore complex, and there's a lot of people who've shared with me that they used to be really into sex when they weren't sober. Then they go to the extreme when they do get sober, and they're having this conflict in their mind of, can I engage with sex for fun, for joy, and all these, and still be spiritual? Or do I have to put it in a box over here and only be with commitment and the husband and or the wife, and these kind of two extremes? I would love to hear your thoughts for those who are struggling, because I've heard it a lot.
So let me understand. You've heard people that were very, very sexual when they were out there, and then they get sober, and that diminishes greatly, or they feel like they can't express themselves fully sexually in their
Yeah.
union now that they're sober. Have they shared with you that they feel some sort of shame or some sort of reticence because their partner may say something? Or
No, it's more so some of the younger women that I've known, and also women that I do know, is this divide almost created between feeling sexually free and liberated when there was alcohol and drugs, and then in sobriety not being able to tap into that, and not knowing it, how do I tap into my sexuality and my sexual nature and feel comfortable about it,
Mhm.
and not get too dogmatic about, is this spiritual? Is this correct? Is this right? Where's the fluid and the juicy?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I can relate to that too. It's this construct of, is this good to do to another person? Am I using them for sex? Or am I just having a good time? Do we need to be in a committed relationship? Is sex in early sobriety a good or bad thing? It's like this, it has so much loadedness to it.
I think sometimes the way we think about sex, the way we think about our bodies, the way we think about we're supposed to be always on it, it's kind of childish. Like, there are some times you could really be with your boo, and both of y'all can look at each other and go, I could take you right now. I can take you right now. And what's up on this TV tonight? What are we looking at?
Yeah.
And that's just like, that is it. Do you know what I mean? That is, woo, so satisfying.
Yeah.
Sometimes women think, oh, I got to keep performing. I got to keep performing.
Yeah.
I got to be on top of it because a lot of times the dudes I work, they're not feeling it. They're not always, or they're trying to be super performant for her, so she's not disappointed. What you asked is complex and rich. And what I love about it is, if I'm in the present moment as a single woman and I need to get my needs taken care of, that looks differently than when I'm dating someone. And if I'm in the present moment as a woman who's married to someone, getting my needs met, wanting to satisfy my partner, maybe I'm not feeling so much about it, but I want them to be happy. It can look different. You aren't the same woman in every single situation. And for me, what two grown people do with each other is always about consent. And whatever the fantasies, the kinks, the fetish, that's nobody's business but you and that other person. I don't think that God cannot be in that. But I also want to tell you, and it's something that I've been studying for the last couple of years, there's something also known as sacred sex, which is really about exploring God consciousness through our bodies as we do sight, hearing, taste, touch. And sex is not this westernized thing of good girl, bad girl. See, that's the problem. There is a collective consciousness that
Yes.
is interfering with voice, desire, sexual exploration. I'm not so sure it's yours or any of the women you're talking about, but it's this overlay. And
Right.
so it goes back to this incredible question: what's motivating you? What do you want? And I first and foremost want to say to any woman, it's so okay to explore and set up a platform for your desire to be met. I think
Yeah.
that's the first thing to know, that our sex drive is God given like everything else. But if we're holding on to some child ideas or religious concepts that want to keep women and or men or people who are, gender nonconforming, that there's somebody else that gets to decide if we are okay and whole and God conscious enough, that's a different issue to me. And I think that has to really be explored. You have to have a God of your understanding that loves sex and loves you as a sexual being. And I do.
That in and of itself is so liberating. It's just so liberating. Just even when you saying, it's okay to create a place for you to be sexual and explore it and nourish it. And I remember sitting in one of your workshops, and you had us do the sensory and taste a raisin in the different ways, and just the mindfulness and the slow and the connecting sweetness. And it's just so intense how different the disconnected, just shoveling of the food, to the slowing down and the creating the sacredness and the dance and the connectivity and that is incredible. With a grape, imagine, with a whole other soul.
Right.
This is the stuff that, one, I want, and two, it's like practicing this slowed down, stripped down, unmasked space. You are one of the people that brings that out so much, and I'm so grateful for it.
And I have to say that I think that's true because of, I stand on the shoulders of giants, the men and women who understood that I had my whole life ahead of me and that I needed to be fully alive in the world, completely committed to service with and for others, but that I was a young woman and my life couldn't stop. It needed to expand. And so going back, because I think there's just a little bit more there, if you don't mind, with, yourself and women. And there are many folks I think of our transgender family members and the way in which, through prostitution or, just a whole kind of lifestyle where sexual activity is about finances and about control and about fetishism and about trying to explore the newness of things and maybe the reality of things, as never before. But the question becomes, when folks are working with me, are you present? Are you in your body? And so those women who you're talking about, there's really some great work with somatic experiencing, how to slow down, how to get in your body so that you can start to track your own desire. I really am in this new phase of my life where I'm talking to women and I'm talking to some of my LGBTQIA family. Can you tell me something? Could you track your desire? If your desire came up, would you know her as such? Because so often it is my experience and also my learning and folks sharing their life with me, we're not actually tracking our desire, we're tracking their desire, their wants.
Yeah.
And when our desire shows up, we don't know it, we bat it away, we get frustrated, we think it's something else, we get over emotional in things, or anxiety comes up, or anger, and it's like, oh no, I just need to be held, or I need to get laid, or I need to have a connection with an adult right now. I want to feel and express myself in that way and not keep being fucked with, like, oh, I gotta be cute, I gotta be forward facing, but it's like, no, Come on, y'all. And create it as we go, whether it be a play posture or a costume. It's like, hey, you and me, can we create this as we go? But that takes a lot of work on ourselves. That takes a lot of getting to know ourselves and getting down to work where we can be with ourselves to deal with ourselves. I don't know how well those women are actually dealing with themselves.
Yeah.
You know, they're accomplishing, they're going, they're doing things, they're listening, they're blah, 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 blah. But, you know,
Yeah.
what are you doing to be with yourself and going, oh, that's my desire?
It's the desire. I mean, I need to check in and do what is the desire and what, like there's certain ones you can pinpoint that are easy, but what is the needing to be held, or I need to be just stroked, or just gimme all over. I don't want to do nothing. Just gimme all over. All those things. It's hard to
And
even identify when it pops up in the moment.
yeah. And there's just something about nesting. You know, there's just something about being so close. You know, that person's smell or their body weight or their personal kinds of sound. You know, there's something about being in that kind of animal body intimacy that is absolutely nourishing and refreshing and restorative and life-giving. And you know, there's quite a few scientific studies right now that says when you're in a healthy sexual relationship, you live longer. You know, your health markers are more towards resiliency, your blood pressure is lower. There's so many things that actually say, because when you think about it, we're born inside a human. I mean, the first sound we know is our mother's breathing, and the second sound we know is her voice. And her voice is in the pitch of our heartbeat.
I did not know that.
Yeah, you know, like all of this stuff, right? And so it's the same, you know, in relationships where sexual connection, or if it's day-to-day living, if that's what you have, and there's this sexual component that can be prayer, meditation, play, fighting. Ooh, you got to get your fight on in there. Get on. I'm
I'm not dealing with you today.
yeah, right. You know, I mean, but it takes two people to create safety and I think have God in the center. And of course, if you're dating, you want whatever level of intimacy you're on to be equal and just and dignified and nourishing, whatever level you're on.
Yes. Yeah.
And always consensual, right? No matter what the kink is.
No matter what. And more important, probably the deeper the kink is. I can go on and on and on with this. And, I think that it's such an important conversation that is, at least I'm not hearing about. And I really think that there's so many questions and people are wandering around not knowing, like which direction can I go in? And really the freedom is like, you get to decide.
So powerful. And you know, there can be sexual misconduct without the act of sex ever being present. Because if we're arousing the bitterness, the jealousy, and the suspicion, there's always this kind of ownership thing that is kind of the sexual kernel. It's like, am I listening? Was this person mature enough? Did I know that they cared way more about me than I did, and I was just going to go get my needs met? You know, was this person too close to my brother, my sister, my boss? You know, I need to kind of look around and see, what was happening here that I wasn't thoughtful of others, right? And am I getting my sexual needs met in the wrong place? Have you ever heard that saying, cook in the kitchen, lady in the parlor, whore in the bedroom? And I said, yeah, I have. She goes, honey, I think you got your rooms mixed up. And there's real truth to that. Am I
messed up?
Yeah. Am I lazy trying to get my sexual needs met in a context
Oh,
that cannot support that. In the office, or in my temple,
yes,
get your shit together, get grown and get up and go get what you need, but you don't have to get it here. What we should have done instead is the beginning of creating. It can be in spiritual terms, but it could also be about the play postures you want. It could also be about the kind of sex you want. It can
yes,
also be about how you'd like your partner to respond to you in your sexual exploration and creativity. But I just think that we're talking about the pathology and the deviance of what we're doing rather than the difficulty, the innocence, and the unskilled part of what we're doing, right? Like, we don't have to keep talking about how fucked up we are.
no,
Sexual identity, sexuality is hard.
mm-hmm, yes,
It's hard. We can talk about intentions and missteps and dreams. We can talk about how to make space for desire. We
yes,
can talk about how to live with desire. If it's craving and yearning, is that spiritual?
right,
Like, we can start to work with these energies that if I'm in craving, if I'm in thirst, it's like, I'm never going to be great. And I don't mean good in bed, I mean fully present, a higher version of myself. I'm always going to be off kilter when attachment and desire that's kind of turned way up because my vision gets cloudy, right? I'm going for what I want. So there's so much to talk about here.
so much. I think that this was incredible and such an amazing, amazing way that you shape and narrate it and get us into this much more honest, much more stripped down, but very real and very true, and things that I feel are a little bit hard to say out loud.
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
so grateful for you to be here.
thanks for having me. I look forward to, it's such a huge part of our lives, and it can really, really be a nourishing and wholesome place to not only find connection with someone else, also find connection with yourself. Masturbating is all good. That can be really wonderful too. Yeah, we just keep plugging away, right? That's all we do, one day at a time.
I love it so much.
I love you. Thanks
I
for
love
having me.
Thank you, Sydney, so much. And if
Okay.
anybody wants to reach out, do you have a website, email, or anything that they can contact you?
Yeah, SydneyReece.com.
Well, thank you all for joining us for another episode of Sober Daughter Podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on our socials at Sober Daughter Podcast, or follow me at Fauna Asfa. And as always, remember to keep doing the good work.
Mm-hmm.